All right, so we are going to get started in just a second here. We'll let some folks filter in. All right, so we'll just give a couple more seconds for folks to log on here, and then we'll get started. All right, folks, so we will get started. I'm sure some folks will filter in, but welcome to the Newington Transit-Oriented Community Walk Audit Virtual Workshop. For those of you that are in attendance or those of you watching the video, we had the opportunity to partner with the Center for Latino Progress from a foundational grant from the Hartford Foundation of Public Giving on promoting transit-oriented development in the greater Hartford area. We proposed 2 locations to do a physical in-person walk audit around 2 existing transit stations. The first was in mid-February around the Berlin-Hartford line station. And subsequently, we did a walk audit in Newington around the Newington Junction CT fast track station a couple of weeks later. So as part of that, we collected the response from the 30 or so people that were in attendance for the Newington walk audit. We made some observations and recommendations for how we think we can improve some of the existing infrastructure in a potential transit-oriented community world. And we also will be joined with the town planner from Newington, who will talk about a particular area within the radius that seems to have a lot of potential for this if we were able to make this happen. So we'll get started. Today, I will be presenting. My name is Pete Harrison. I'm the inaugural director of DesegregateCT, originally from Avon, Connecticut. I've been involved in DesegregateCT for over a year and very excited to be director. And we'll have Thomas from Transport Hartford and the Center for Latino Progress introduce himself in just a little while. So the agenda for this workshop, we're going to do a quick introduction about our organizations, about what we're talking about with transit-oriented communities. We're going to describe what they mean in terms of opportunity for more homes, more economic activity, more tax revenue. Oops, sorry, we didn't update this. This is supposed to be Newington. But we'll talk about what the site is in the Newington Junction area currently and what our goals for the walk audit were. And then we'll talk about observations from the feedback we got from folks on, and we'll have an opportunity to walk through some of the pictures and some of the maps to pull out some interesting comments, and then we'll have opportunity for questions and comments. So just a quick introduction for DesegregateCT. We are a pro-homes coalition of neighbors and nonprofits. We have about 85 groups ranging from affordable housing developers to anti-racism groups to environmental groups. And we are dedicated to seeing a more sustainable and equitable Connecticut by focusing on land use policy at the local and at the state level. As we'll talk about later in the workshop, we are at the moment proposing a transit-oriented development bill at the state level to unlock the potential for sites that we'll be even talking about today at Newington Junction. So we'll have an opportunity to talk about some action items at the local level, but certainly at the state level for folks to get involved with. All right, so I want to talk quickly about an overview of what we're talking about when we're talking about transit-oriented communities, what we're talking about in the landscape of Connecticut. We put together a great report that we'll link to in the chat, just from research based in our zoning atlas that talks about the current land use patterns around the 40 towns and cities in Connecticut that have either a rail station or a rapid bus station, as highlighted in this slide. So in total, there are 62 stations, predominantly rail stations, but we were excited to highlight one of the CT fast track stations today. What we found overall is that we are not developing enough around these existing stations and this existing infrastructure. And just for perspective, the state of Connecticut, all of us have invested over $1 billion in the last 10 years or so, improving the existing infrastructure for the CT Fast Track line, Hartford line, some of the improvements on our rail lines. And of course, we have more money coming from the federal government from the infrastructure bill. So the opportunity to really get the most bang for our public buck is not being taken advantage of in a majority of towns right now in Connecticut. So 32 of the 40 transit towns I previously showed make multifamily homes hard to build near transit stations. Multifamily homes could be anything from a duplex, townhouses, to a apartment building with 50 units, whatever that in between structure. Unfortunately, many towns with transit stations do not allow them as of right, or do not allow them as at all. These are the stations right now that do not allow as of family multifamily housing near station. We highlight one here for Newington, of course, which we're talking about today. So we really think there's a great opportunity for a very targeted approach to TOCs in Newington as one of the towns that currently does not have that opportunity. So what this means in the broader sense is that rather than encouraging infill development, walkable communities, commutes that do not require cars, we are locked into a land use pattern that requires sprawl. This is very much because 80% of the zoned residential land in Connecticut is zoned for single family housing on nearly an acre of land, which drives development further out from our core centers, making folks have to drive more to go to school, shops, and services, or to work. And this has, of course, a negative impact on our individual household budgets. 20% of the typical family in Connecticut's budget goes towards transportation costs. This is a damaging aspect for towns to have to spend money on the sewage lines, the pipes, the asphalt for roads to supply this sprawl. And of course, there's an environmental damage to this by increased carbon emissions across the state. So really what we see as transit-oriented communities is the opportunity to reverse that trend and concentrate, develop around certain key assets in the public infrastructure that we already have. So our bill, quickly, which I'll talk more about at the back of the workshop, but what we are proposing at the state level right now in Connecticut is very similar to what just passed in Massachusetts last year. This was a bipartisan, nearly unanimous bill, which I think speaks to the fact that this is really kind of low-hanging fruit in terms of policy interventions to create housing and reduce carbon emissions. The Massachusetts bill requires similar 15 homes per acre to what we're proposing, around a half-mile radius of a MBTA, their commuter and rapid rail and bus systems. They have a bit of a larger system than Connecticut does, but it's very similar land use patterns there. So just to talk about what we really mean when we talk about transit-oriented communities and we talk about 15 homes per acre, this image is a good illustration of what that means and why we use the term gentle density. Oftentimes folks that are used to a certain pattern of single family housing are freaked out or think that's everything's going to turn into Manhattan or something like that. But what really this baseline sets up, as you see here, could be a mixture of single family homes in place with townhomes, with duplexes, with multifamily. There are opportunities to increase that density if folks want to put up a apartment building. But the point is that the scale that this kind of development would work really would be dictated by what the town sees as the best way to meet this goal that the state is outlining. So one of the aspects that we're talking about for our proposal, just to reiterate, we are trying to create these kinds of mixed use walkable communities that leverage the existing public transportation system we already have in the state. This is great from a state standpoint because it doesn't cost any money to encourage home construction. It just means assisting some towns in allowing for that to be the case and taking advantage of the investments we've already made. And specifically how that will be is within a 10-minute walk of the station, which is about a half-mile radius, as I said. The 15 homes per acre can be figured out in a certain percentage of that radius. The point is to make sure that the average across the zone is 15 homes per acre. So if a town wanted to do 25% of that radius, as we might suggest in Newington, that might mean a small area zoned for higher home opportunities, say 30, 45 homes per acre. So the town has a lot of opportunity to shape development and growth within this bound. And one final thing we'll point out too is that we are having a 10% house affordability requirement within the bill to encourage the deeply affordable housing creation as part of this opportunity. So if you have some more questions or more curiosity about our proposal, I encourage you to visit our DesegregateCT.org website dedicated to TOCs. It's /TOC. This you'll find some great videos explaining what TOCs are, the benefits for Connecticut specifically, some of the research that our team has put together outlining the economic, environmental, and racial benefits for TOCs, and also, again, to demystify some of the concerns that folks might have about what this would really mean specifically in certain communities. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Thomas here and let him get into what we accomplished on the walk audit a few weeks ago.
Hey everybody, my name is Thomas Regan-Lefebvre, and I am the coordinator at the Transport Academy at the Center for Latino Progress. We advocate for modes of transportation which are environmentally sustainable, accessible, and equitable. And we were very much interested in working with Desegregate on this campaign, not just because of the housing crisis we're going through, but especially for two other items, which are environment and safety. We, as the state, has some clear targets to reduce its emissions and is not on target. And one way to reduce emissions from the transportation sector, which is the largest contributor of emission in our state, is to focus on developing housing near transit hubs. So there is this aspect here, and it does reduce, of course, vehicle mass travel. It does reduce cars on the road, and very much in favor of this type of mode shifting type of transition. The other element is, of course, safety, and it's a concern for which is very much the core of what we do. And we are very worried because from the beginning of this year, there have been 17 pedestrians killed in 2022. And if you compare to last year, 2021, the first pedestrian fatality was on February the 18th. So we are on track to have a very powerful year for vulnerable road users in our state. So that's and as we are also moving towards a society which is a bit older, there's a need for this type of environment which is livable, where it is workable, where people go out and walk their dogs and are happy and say hi to each other. And I really think that is how we create functioning and positive community, is by being outside and by meeting people. And it's very much a goal that is embraced as well by other organizations, speaking of ARP, for example, and we've been following some of their guideline on how to conduct work audits. We've been following their toolkits here, and this is what some of the participants of this work audit form that they filled out. And so that's part of this campaign of being in a livable space. Can you put the next slide? Yeah, so that was the background I was just talking about. And, really the goal is to focus on what could be improved in terms of walkability, safety for pedestrians, and any kind of vulnerable road users. And bear in mind that, so we do that on a regular basis. Sometimes we are invited by municipality to do this type of work with it. Sometimes there's a group of residents who contact us and we do this, this type of work. And we do produce a report, and we're going to share one with all stakeholders, so all of you later on. But this type of report with recommendation is often shared by the municipalities whenever they're applying for grants, for connectivity grants, which can help municipality to fund sidewalks and other pedestrian safety devices. So, you want to go to the next one? So there was probably this shape of an omega here, loop, big focus on the Willard Avenue, the state road, which really divides the space, and there's definitely some room for improvement, and two areas. So the one on the west, which is nicely residential, and we went down south as well to around Park as well, Brook Street and so on, to keep in this half a mile radius, which is the proposal from Desegregate. Maybe now I can share my screen and we can talk a little bit about in this first section, in the first portion, the one second, of the industrial estate. I think Renata, who is here, wanted to interject, but I see that Terry has a question.
Well, it's actually more of a comment. Why don't you continue speaking? But I've got a few things to say about this. I've got a lot of experience with this since about 2011, but I'll wait until you're done, and then let me talk then, okay?
Thank you. Well, we keep you. Tell us again when you're ready. Renata, do you want to speak about this this area on the north part of the junction station? Sorry.
Sure. So I'm looking in the room and I'm trying to remember if there is anybody in the room that actually wasn't on the walk when I spoke about this there. And so I don't want to repeat like the same thing that I kind of said before, but in general, one of the ideas that I contemplated, and we were waiting actually for sort of COVID restrictions to die down a little bit, which just happened. So, hopefully this summer, depending on the workload, we might be reaching out to the community to sort of start vetting this idea out. One of the ideas for this general area was to the north and to the left, or to the what's that? West. Right, that's west. From the tracks, there is a section of the of this area that is industrial, and that area backs to the properties that are single-family homes, and some of them are historic, beautiful homes. Now, in sort of conjunction with this, I have applied for a planning grant and actually gotten this planning grant for the promotion of the historic area in this section. And the idea is to look at what we can do with the historic asset that we have in this section. So behind these homes, there is this industrial area off of Spring Street, off of Shepherd Drive. Now, Spring Street is too narrow. It's really not like a good street to make into a street for a TOD. But Shepherd Drive definitely lends itself well for a street that could get into something, it would require probably compiling of a couple of industrial properties. It could be a development that is a TOD overlay on top of the industrial zone. I think, we'll go to the community and see how they feel, but my instinct is I would prefer it to be an overlay over just industrial. I would prefer to keep the residential portion fronting Newington Road, residential and historic, with the homes that are there now, perhaps improving on them and preserving them and complementing what could happen in the back portion of this. There is a lot of question, obviously. There could be some issue with environmental remediation. We did reach, when I first started working here, I did contact number of property owners in the back there and ask them if they would be open to consider this kind of zoning amendment if something was proposed there, and they were open to it. They were interested because this area is industrial, but it really doesn't lend itself very well to industrial, and it's in walking proximity to the city fast track station. It would help the residential development just because it's more compatible use. And so that's kind of what could happen here. There is, in my opinion, quite a bit of a potential. In addition to all that, actually, I worked on another grant that I didn't get this year. It's a competitive grant, which is probably, why I'm going to have to keep on applying for it, to extend the multi-purpose trail from where it terminates on Newington Junction to connect it with Trout Brook Trail in West Hartford. So all this, was kind of in the works, and all together could create some opportunity in this area.
Yeah.
And I apologize if everybody heard this already, like if this is the second time around to people.
Well, no, this is why we're recording this too, for posterity's sake and for reference points. But thank you, Renata. Yeah, we were talking about this as a potentially very good example of what we're talking about in terms of allowing just a certain amount of areas to be upzoned. Sorry, let me just realize I wasn't on there. Sorry. Rather than, if you're looking at this map, the station's kind of at the bottom there, and a half-mile radius of that, covers the majority of this district on both sides of the busway, as well as, some predominantly single-family residential areas, sort of on all sides of it. And what we're really saying here, and why I think this is such a good example that we picked Newington for, is that the town of Newington really could concentrate on this industrial zone, and potentially rezone there at a 30, 45 home per acre or something like that, to really satisfy that radius requirement. And obviously, that would increase the tax base, that would increase homes for existing residents and for future residents, and create some mixed use opportunities without really disturbing some of the neighborhood on South Main Street or even south of Francis Avenue, as we'll talk about the rest of the route here. So we wanted to start with this section, partly because this is a great opportunity. And as Renata mentioned, a lot of the property owners here recognize the upside of this, and would be willing to work with the town under something like this. So a lot of potential, but also a lot of very smart, concentrated potential that really would not impact some of the other segments of this trip that we'll talk about. So with that, yeah, Thomas, if you want to continue on, unless Terry, I know you've been patient. If you wanted to make a comment now, we're happy to have that discussion.
Sure. Yeah, because it's most of the stuff I want to talk about is things that we're talking about as we speak. You can hear me all right, right?
Yes.
Okay. Transit-oriented development zones have been in place for 10 years. Okay. There's tax benefits to it, and there's a lot of progress that could have been made in the past that we did not do. I was a majority leader for the town council in Newington when Connecticut Fast Track was coming. And I actually chaired a committee for the 4 towns. I wasn't for or against Fast Track at that point, but I'm saying we're gonna have 2 stations and we're supposed to have a rail station. And I want to make sure that we look at this transit-oriented development and get something that's gonna work. I'm also have been involved in the Commuter Rail Council. I was put on by Tony Guerrera from the Transportation Committee at that time because Newington was supposed to get a rail station. So I represent the Hartford line. And I can tell you that I'm still working with Ned Lamont on this. We're trying to get $8 billion to expand the Hartford line from Springfield to Worcester to Boston. And it will generate about $80 billion in economic development. And it will also give us more places, that we can put people. I'm also very much involved in climate change. And right now, the 8491 corridor is the most congested in Connecticut, the most congested in New England, and 30th in the country. So you've got people that, because of, let's say, planning and zoning in certain towns can be a little prohibitive in terms of what you can get people to do. You have people that are stuck in big cities like Hartford, where they've got terrible air quality. We have the 4th highest rate of asthma in the country. Our water quality is not good. And a lot of that's because of the congestion around these things. So affordable housing, transit-oriented development, it impacts a lot, okay? There are seniors that want to downsize. There are millennials that only want 1.3 cars instead of 2. They want walkable, sustainable communities. There are people that are working in our towns that can't afford to live in the towns. And I don't think that's right. So workforce housing, and then a percentage of that would also be for affordable housing. But what happened was we actually had something going on Fenn Road. And there was a national welding site there. We got Mike Vermouth from CDA. They tore the building down. They did brownfield remediation. And we had a company ready to come in and put up a 5-story building. The first story was going to be mixed use. The next 4 were going to be off-campus housing for Central Connecticut students, which they sorely needed. Next to that, a 4-story parking garage. Governor Malloy had agreed to lease 3 of the floors for transit, and the 4th floor would have been mixed-use development. Our whole town council was in favor of it. Our planning and zoning people got together and put a 3-year moratorium on any building. Okay, so the developer walked, the governor walked, Jim Rediker, the head of transportation, everybody walked away and said, thanks a lot, Newington. And then in 2015, both Democrats and Republicans were running on a ticket of the governor's going to take our land, build high density, low income housing, and those people are going to come to Newington. So 5 of us walked. I was a majority leader, the mayor, the deputy mayor. We said, that's not the way we're going to treat people here. And a lot of it, again, is around zoning, and it's in most of the towns they're prohibiting people from getting out of these, certain areas of the town. So I think it's important that we're doing this. It's important to talk about it. I think near the train station or near the bus station, we have that industrial. I mean, we could do brownfield remediation again there, especially that first factory that we looked at when we were walking. I mean, that place has been vacant for a long time. We could renovate that, do the brownfield remediation, and that whole area where they were going to put the train station. We are now pushing for the train station on Cedar Street. So that whole area that's open right there, where there's a nursery, but then there's just an open area where the parking was going to be for the train station. I think that whole area is a very workable transit-oriented development community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Terry. I mean, we really appreciated on the walk too, just going through some of the different sites and giving us some of the context in addition to Renata's input. So, it's something that we, of course, anyone on this call that's supportive of these efforts recognize that there are pockets of opposition, whether on certain parts of the boards or just in certain parts of the community. I think some of it is just a lack of an awareness of what some of the potential is here. And that's really where both of our organizations have done a lot of outreach like this to really, demystify some of the talking points that opponents often say, which are usually not very accurate, even if there are good faith. But also, again, showing that there are a beginning point of a conversation, that the state's made an immense amount of investment admirably in our public transportation system for economic reasons, for climate reasons, all that we've talked about. And again, it's really, we think, incumbent upon towns at the local level make these kinds of natural extensions of these investments at zoning areas. And Newington's such an interesting example too, Terry, as you pointed out, because there was interest in a lot of the electeds to have something like this, and there's some pushback, and we're really hoping an event like this and the workshop and the report that we'll do again can assist folks in the town that really want to see something like this, that recognize the upside of it. For better or for worse, we are in the housing crisis, and rent prices are going up, home prices are going up. With the war in Europe, we're of course back to high gas prices, which always gives us the opportunity to plug public transportation and ways to get folks out of cars. So we certainly hope that the time is right for more of this kind of intervention. But having folks like you that have been plugging away at this, and Rada been plugging away at this, any assistance that we can give on this is really what we're here for, and we really appreciate the insights.
Excellent. Let me tell you one other thing too. Okay, I did speak to the president of Central Connecticut and also the COO, and they're very much in favor of the rail station going to Cedar Street because they've got 12,000 students and they've got faculty, and the COO is very much into climate change, concerned about it. So he wants to get the students and the teachers, out of their cars too, and onto the trains and the buses. So I think there's a lot going on right now, and you're very timely. And I think the Berlin is a perfect example. I went out there, I didn't go on your walk, but I went out there and I looked at it all. And I think Berlin is really taking advantage of it, as are a lot of other towns. Windsor Locks, a lot of towns are figuring out what needs to happen here. And I think it's time for us to do it too. So very timely.
Yeah, and we really think that getting this state proposal gets all 40 of these towns and cities the opportunity, because we know there are folks in all of these towns, even if things are not getting done at the board level, that want this. So giving the opportunity to give some space, not just to zone locally and see some of these opportunities, but hopefully getting some of the other state opportunities in place. Rana, talked about a number of different grants, connectivity grants and competitive grants for historic preservation, even to some degree, with financing for subsidized housing. There are lots of great programs the state has put together, and what we're really trying to do is get all that kind of in the right direction, doing the same thing, going for the same goals, and making it easier for folks at the town level to take advantage of these. I mean, it can be a very long process. I mean, the remediation process alone is very expensive. It's very timely, and we've had really great support from some of the state agencies. And I think I see maybe one or two people from transportation on here as well. But for both of these walk audits so far, we've been really excited about Department of Transportation and some of the others' support for this idea, and recognize the upside of these investments and the return on these investments. So it is a long process, and we really appreciate the both of you for kind of being in the trenches here for a long time. And we're coming in to help push and make some noise at the state level. And I see we have Rep. Kate on here as well, who was at the walk audit as well. We've got some great champions at the state level, trying to get this over the line. So we're pretty optimistic, and we'll certainly talk more about this after the rest of the walk audit about the TOC proposal. But really, thanks, Terry, for your input. And we're trying to stay on time here to get through the rest of our walk audits here. So I'll turn it back over to you, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to go back to the presentation, or do you want me to share my screen with you?
Yeah, I'll share the screen. Sorry.
Okay, good.
Just one second.
Great, and thank you, Terry. I think we've been on a few calls together as well. Good to good to see you finally. Yeah, I mean, and saying talking about fast track, it's a wonderful station. I mean, it's clean. Fast track is a really great a really great tool to move people, and I think here, as you say, Berlin has taken a lot of great opportunities, and we've seen the effect of it with having all development around. There's brewery and so on, so it's a very nice area just around. And I think Newington has the potential here to become quite similar here. And there is some room for improvement definitely. And if you go to the next slide, that's this one. So I mean, we can talk a lot about that, but there are many areas around this this first section on Willard that there's just no sidewalk, and it is problematic from really a safety perspective, because I mean, if you probably heard of this tragic crash in East Windsor a couple of days ago. A teenager was killed by a car, and in a similar setting, a place where there was no sidewalk on a state road, for I believe. So and we really believe here at the Transport Afford that every level of government should prioritize those vulnerable road users in all their development. So I mean, and you all notice that there's no sidewalk, there's hardly crosswalk around it. It feels pretty unsafe to cross, and there are bus stops. So if you arrive at one bus stop, how do you cross back to go to the other place and so on, front adapt, and especially when crashes really happen. So of course we recommend to use transportation to apply for connectivity grants to DOT and get those sidewalk and crosswalk done. Of course, we want backlanes, ideally protected, and it's an area where cars are flying in a way to slow down cars. It's not just, and here we are in an area which is beautiful. There's all these nice old houses here, and it would be a very nice work, if there's a development in this industrial area, to actually to walk from the station to the development. So we encourage you to the municipality to as a council to explore that. And some people assume that there is no sidewalk because there is no need and people don't walk. Well, in the next slide, this is a screenshot from Google Maps, and we see footsteps on the snow. So there are actually people actually walking here, taking the bus, even if we don't always notice them. Next slide, still on Willard. This is really problematic, which is just south of the station. There's cars are coming very fast and turning, and there's no crosswalk, and that's it's dangerous. And if you turn to the left, the sidewalk disappears, and on the right too, there's no sidewalk as well. So it's be very well inspired to put the perspective of pedestrians at the center of any type of redevelopment there. Some in the comments we get in the forums, many commented on the level of litters around Willard Avenue, and I guess it's a state-owned avenue, and I wonder if there's some opportunities for cleanup as well. Next slide. So if you look at the bus stops, I don't think we noticed any of them with some waiting area, apart from the one at the junction, at the station itself. Sometimes they're not connected, and there's definitely some effort there from folks who want to go to the station. And I think it's something that connection is something very important if you want to have the fluidity in our transit system. So that's something definitely to investigate, and we make some recommendation on that as well. So second question. So once we managed to cross the state road, so the west of Willard Avenue, and I think this part was actually technically in West Hartford. And something interesting, as soon as we get into West Hartford, sidewalks appeared. It was pretty interesting contrast. The whole area of Sampson Street is very pleasant to walk around, residential, sometimes there's no post-work, but in the meantime, we do recognize that cars are not driving aggressively in this neighborhood residential area. Next slide. And then, yeah, on the West Hartford Road, we noted positive elements such as bike lane. And it's good. Of course, we wish they were protected, but it's in itself an element. It's a long, straight line, and it does encourage speeding. And cars were there were actually at fairly above the speed limit, or it looks like it. And there'll be probably some ways to investigate where to slow this traffic calming and all the devices to make it safer for everybody. And it's also an area in terms of zoning. I think Peter knows you don't want to talk about it, but there's some small development there. I think there's one on the right of this picture, and there's a few other as well. So think about it as these people who live in the development, having access to fast track and so on. I think it's just a 5-7 minute walk to the station from here, from where this picture was taken. So there's definitely some going in the right direction here.
Yeah, I'll just add on this section. Yeah, predominantly single family zoning. However, there are some multifamily areas, including some subsidized housing right by the station. And of course, as Renata pointed out, there a majority of the abutting properties along the station or the line are kind of light manufacturing industrial. So really, and we had some residents on the walk that day that I think were from that single family neighborhood that were kind of walking through in this part of the route. And I think it was helpful because they did recognize that, the zoning is enabling, it's not mandating any changes. So as we'll go later in this part of the route through the single family home area, that would really not be impacted unless, again, a resident wanted to, increase that with the duplex or something like that. But yeah, very, very pleasant area.
Yeah, thanks. Next slide. Yeah, and the third question is the southern part of around and in the east part of Willard. So we went through Francis Avenue, and this feels really unsafe. I mean, going down, there's a blind corner. Cars are coming pretty fast from Willard, and they're coming at near highway speeds. So this area needs some love for vulnerable road users. Need some sidewalks. You need the marking even on the road is not very clear. I understand that it's close to another industrial area on the other side of the tracks, but it's also residential here. And if you think of it, I mean, we want our kids to feel safe to go to school, to work to school, to go to activities and go on their bikes and so on. And this is not an area where I would let my kids walk and go on their bikes and so on. Next slide. And Brook and Star Street, there's this nice little park here. It's cute. Drivers seem to respect and drive pretty slow here, so it feels pretty pleasant. Although there's no sidewalks and hardly any crosswalks, it has its well taken care residential feeling and community feeling as well. But of course, I think many people will feel safer with some basic amenities for pedestrians. And finally, I just want to put a note here. So it's how it looks like when if you're on Willard Avenue and you're going to the station. It looks like this, and really, it's like walking on a highway, close to a highway. There's here it's a protection for pedestrians we very much work on, and we are very much at the again cars going at highway speed. And so we have a lot of recommendations and comments on all this part, and we're going to write put together a report, and also based on some of the comments of this discussion, and we share with everybody. So, any comments or questions either on the audit part, on the proposal from Keith, and on the legislative element?
Yeah, I want to give anybody an opportunity just that was on the walk audits and either of the groups to speak up and share any observations. And we had a comment in the chat, of course, thinking of the poor East Windsor High students on a similarly non-sidewalked street. So we, as Thomas pointed out, know that there's real risk and real stakes to these kinds of conversations. It's not abstract, unfortunately. So there's a lot of opportunity to rethink some of our systems. One thing I want to say, when we went through the Francis Avenue, Day Street was that offshoot right there. And Terry, we were in a group together. And I think Renata, you'd mentioned this as well, that again, this Day Street runs parallel with the track on the other side of the industrial zone that we were talking about earlier. But again, there seems to be some interest of those property owners, and it was, not heavily trafficked. There was some kind of large commercial trucks going by that, again, from a pedestrian standpoint, we're a little bit unsafe. But in just pure proximity to the station, and frankly to the residential neighborhood with that nice park, really the parklet that we saw there, there's some nice residential amenities there. So this is one of those really classic, just kind of legacy communities that built mixed use, kind of close proximity to itself. So I was personally surprised that even though, reviewing beforehand the industrial corridor there, that it was so accessible to the existing residential, the existing parklet, and you can just see the opportunity for those parcels of land to be developed in mixed use, the 5/1s or something like that. But yeah, there's just, on both sides of that track corridor, there really are a considerable amount of assets for really pleasant, pedestrian safe communities. It's not a big lift. That's really the big takeaway. I think we were, planning the routes and going through, and once you're actually there seeing it, it's very encouraging for us that there's opportunity here, and it's not, a moonshot type ordeal to get some of the opportunities here. I don't know, Tara, if you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I did want to make a comment. I had a meeting this week with representatives of the town council, and also Gary Turco was there. And there's issues about deadening traffic. I mean, we had Cedar Street, 2 people were killed on Cedar Street in an accident not too long ago. But I think the issue of sidewalks is an interesting one, because in many situations, it's Department of Transportation that has to decide if they will put sidewalks in. But we did have a discussion about potentially having the developers, when they develop some of these properties, make that part of the development, put the sidewalks in. I'm not sure how that plays out, but sidewalks are going to be an important issue, and it's going to have to be a partnership to get that sort of thing done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, we've been really encouraged with the Department of Transportation that's been involved in these walk audits and these conversations, following along with our proposal at the state level. Yeah, there's the interest in a number of these situations, particularly on the state roads, of course, where there are bus corridors already, to further interconnect the residential communities and lay the foundation for more kinds of development. So, I want to pivot quickly, just back to talking about the proposal, which ties into this conversation, I think, as we're closing up here. Sorry, let me just get this going here. So, our approach here is, really based on 2 kind of approaches of local input, working with towns, Newington, Berlin, certainly, and at the state level. So we just want to highlight again that as of today, we have a bill number for the transit-oriented development bill that's currently in the Planning and Development Committee. There will be a public hearing Monday morning at 10 a.m. where folks can submit testimony in favor of a TOD bill. We have some resources here just quickly that folks, if they want to learn a little bit more about TOCs, prepare some testimony either to write or to sign up, you can check out on DesegregateCT.org/testify. That gives you all kinds of talking points and a template. We'll also direct you to the Planning and Development Committee Zoom registration for the hearing on Monday, and also where to submit written testimony through their email address. So that are some resources for folks to keep in mind going forward. Second, we of course really encourage people that made a great turnout for the Newington Walk Audit from folks in Newington and some other towns that are interested in this. So the number one thing you can do is show up to these kinds of meetings where these decisions are getting made. I can promise you, and Terry and Renata can back this up, there are a lot of really hardworking, smart people that work in these towns that want to see this kind of development, recognize the upside for existing residents and businesses and future residents and future businesses. And they need to hear from residents to say, hey, I want this in my community too. I want this for my kids. I want this for my grandkids. So, you can get involved with our organization and coalition through organizing at DesegregateCT.org. We are really right now focused on the state level legislation that we're pushing, but our really everyday bread and breakfast is is to get folks showing up at these planning and zoning hearings, to feel empowered to speak up, educate neighbors, educate local officials, and in some cases, even run for planning and zoning boards yourself. So just want to get those resources up, and we can share some more of the information about the hearing. If you want to sign up for our newsletter, that's also on our website down at the bottom on the right on the page you scroll onto, that you can stay up on weekly emails about things going on in the state, in your community, and ways to get involved with that kind of work. All right, so at that point, want to just again open it up for anybody with kind of some last minute questions, either about the proposal, Thomas just put the language in specifically, or next steps in Newington, or how to get involved with the pro-homes movement across the state, fighting for these kinds of changes. Well, we strongly encourage everybody on this call, particularly because it's pretty urgent, to think about testifying for transit-oriented development bill on Monday morning. And we'll follow up in the email with some more resources about that. Oh, I think Catherine, I'm sorry, Gail, you had your hand up. Sorry, I didn't see you in the chat. You might be muted still.
Yeah, okay. No, I can't find the raise the hand button. I just have a question about the bill. Now, the bill is going to be for all transit-oriented communities within the state. It's not just targeted to the Hartford region.
That's correct. So it would cover all 40 cities and towns with a transit station. So that's train stations, along the Metro North line, New Haven, Shoreline East, Waterbury Branch, Danbury Branch, and of course the Hartford line and Amtrak and the CT Fast Track.
And I just have I don't know, more of a theoretical, I guess, question, but, particularly, you're from Avon, let's say you grew up in Avon. While we're reducing, let's say, or increasing the number of homes per acre around the transit-oriented development, it seems that isn't this further segregating land use in the state of Connecticut by most of the density will be around those 40 communities, and the remainder, like your Farmingtons, your Avons, your Simsburys, your Cantons, will never be, it's just, they're going to remain, rural and spread out and blah, blah, blah. And then all the density will be focused on, will be more focused on, it just seems that it's increasing the disparity rather than decreasing it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I guess I have I have two responses to that. One is, I think undoubtedly, given the racial and economic segregation in Connecticut, coupled with the environmental crisis we have, it makes a lot of sense to concentrate our future growth around public transportation structures. It's condemning a lot of people to have expensive cars and all kinds of the related expenses because of that. So we all think it's a really good thing to build in smart places with existing infrastructure, and not just public transportation, but existing water and sewer. So that undoubtedly is good, and will break down a lot of those barriers, because we are talking about mixed use development. We're talking about folks all across the age and class and racial spectrum to be able to access these kinds of resources. The other thing is I don't, growing up in Avon, they're not off the hook. We have different proposals and ideas for encouraging infill development, even in towns like in Avon that doesn't have a train station, although it used to. But the idea there is reducing minimum lot size requirements, increasing along major sort of commercial corridors in Avon, specifically like a Route 44 or in Farmington, a Route 4, places where there already is mixed use development and opportunity for that. That reduces the risk for, the classic sprawl development of taking farmland or forests, which is kind of where the logic of development goes now, and encouraging it in places that already have some of that infrastructure. So, part of the give and take of the political system is you kind of pick your battles in certain legislative sessions. And we're very excited about what we got passed last year, which had some really great, statewide opportunities for accessory dwelling units and reducing parking. We are coming back next session with minimum lot size, with some other ideas that we think complement this really important work for transit-oriented development, but certainly in suburban and rural communities, we want to concentrate development where it makes sense. So it's a great question to raise, and I apologize for not giving some more of that context in the early part, but every town can benefit from these kinds of smart planning reforms. It'll look differently than in a Newington, even in Berlin or West Hartford, Wethersfield. But I assure you there are opportunities to be really smart about creating more homes for more kinds of people across the state. And that's really what both of our organizations are attempting to do.
Well, one of the things I do like about your approach is it does seem to be taking like the current character of the community in mind and working more cooperatively with the community. It's not as threatening. Quite frankly, previous efforts were a little bit more top-down directive rather than cooperative, like this approach seems to be. And, again, like I said, respecting the character of what's there now and how it can be supplemented and added to attain your goals. So I thank you for your efforts.
Very much appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, and Berlin's a great example of this too. They're proactively doing this. It's at a scale that fits, 3-story buildings, 4-story buildings. And we really think the future of land use reform is empowering folks in towns that we know want this, that these are popular and smart ideas. And it's not something that, even if it's a state level process, it's still going to be dictated and controlled by folks that want to see these kinds of changes at the town level. That's good policy. It's good politics. Renata, do you have
if I may add, yes, I actually do. So I've been asking Desegregate to sort of focus on this aspect as well from the organization's inception. Rather than focusing on promoting density in, pardon my language, boonies where it doesn't really belong, climate crisis wise, planning wise, common sense wise, infrastructure wise, it just doesn't belong. We should focus on how we distribute the money, the funding. So one of the approaches that as a state we should really start looking into is how do we invest funding? So where we are promoting greater density, we should be promoting greater funding supports. So if we are saying, let's have TOD funding, then great, yes, but then let's invest money in infrastructure. Let's invest money in redevelopment, in environmental cleanup, in all kinds of school programs. Like, then let's focus, let's have state actually focus monies to those communities. And that's how it should work. Planning should not really be encouraging, higher density housing out in Canton, or, I'm just like picking random communities, but in places where you have to build 300 miles of a road and 300 miles of a sewer lane that then we have to maintain and support and all that stuff. So that's just my 5 cents. I've been, ever since this organization started, I've been kind of like saying we have to tie this together with talking about money as well, because the policy alone, without talking about policy that talks about funding, just, doesn't go far enough. And great efforts, by the way, like, I'm supporter, but we gotta like bring the money in too.
Yep, show me the money. Terry, did you have a final comment? I want to be mindful, we're at 2 o'clock, so we'll wrap it up here. You might be muted, Terry. Terry, you're still muted, sorry.
Okay, hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so 2 things. One thing we haven't talked about is parking. And what is planned around transit-oriented development usually is that we do not need as much parking spaces as we build into other places, so it can give us more room. If it's transit-oriented development and people are walkable, sustainable communities, we don't need as many parking spaces. So we haven't talked about that, but that's something that developers talk about, et cetera. And then the second thing is, if you look at what West Hartford has done around the bus stations, if you look at what Aaron Stewart, I was chair of the fast track committee. When I left politics, I gave it over to Aaron Stewart, and she has done a tremendous job in New Britain around transit-oriented development. So those are 2 other communities that show examples of the things that can happen. And thank you for today. I think it was very important today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. And really, want to keep the conversation going in Newington and beyond in this corridor. I just Rachel had a question in the chat. Does the bill allow for greenfield/open space development? I hope it focuses on infill and redevelopment of already developed areas. So yeah, our proposal within the half-mile radius of a transit station, we do have kind of common sense carve outs for environmentally sensitive land, potentially for, as a case of Newington Junction, if there are historic areas that are not yet preserved but might want to be. Again, this is really where the town plays a significant role in this. There's just a baseline 15 homes per acre across this radius, but within that, to all the points that Renata just talked about and Terry just talked about, working with the developer, working with the town to figure out what really makes sense and at what scale. It's a complicated ballet, and we're just trying to get the ball rolling a little bit on that. But certainly towns can take that step to figure out where the existing infrastructure exists for water and sewer, what kinds of investments they want to make to maximize that infrastructure. So it's very much been thoughtfully designed for that. And again, it's one piece of legislature. We are legislative bill. We have a lot of other really good ideas, and I very much encourage folks to sign up for our newsletter as we do more events like this with more workshops. We're going to do a lot of follow up on these kind of minimum lot size proposals too, to reduce the land for housing in certain areas. So there's just a lot of really, luckily it's not rocket science. We're not reinventing the wheel. There are a lot of really good ideas that are working already in Connecticut, historically had been before, that we're just trying to revive that. So in many cases, if there's one takeaway, it's to some degree that we're getting back to what we love about the nature of our communities in Connecticut and that character of dense walkability. Even small towns in many parts of this state were built around transit stations historically. So in many cases, this is getting an old idea, dusting it off and bringing it back to solve a lot of our problems our state has now and a lot that we're going to be facing in the next 20 or 30 years. So on that, again, I really appreciate folks. Apologize for running a few minutes over, but thank you so much, Renata. Thank you so much, Terry, for speaking up on behalf of the town. Thanks everybody for being on. Thomas and I have had a lot of fun working on these, meeting a lot of folks in Newington, and really encourage staying in touch, both about our state proposal and for what we can help on getting some of these things done in Newington. So thank you a lot on behalf of everybody, and have a good rest of your day, and hope to see some of you on Monday testifying.
Thank you.